Greetings! Welcome to This, That, and the Other, where I react to, respond to, comment on, question, or otherwise propound on whatever I find of interest on any given day. Now, today's topic Farmer Cotton had been filling Frodo and the company in on the happenings in the Shire since they left. Into the middle of this came Sam, bursting in with his gaffer. The old man says he's glad Frodo is back safe and all, but respectfully berates him for selling Bag End, which actually started all the trouble, and the ruffians came and tore up Bagshot Row and ruined his taters. Frodo apologized and promised to make amends. The gaffer says, well, that's fair, and then inquires as to Sam's behavior on their journey. Frodo, of course, gives Sam a glowing report, saying he's become one of the most famous people in the land. Sam blushed, but when he saw the look on Rosie's face, he was eternally grateful to Frodo. They were all up early next morning. Nothing had been heard in the night, but more trouble was certainly on its way. Seems as if none of the ruffians were left up at Bag End, said Cotton, but the Waymeet gang will be along any time now. After breakfast, the messenger from Tookland rode in, high spirits, crying that Thane has razed all our country, and the news was spreading like wildfire. The ruffians that were watching the land have fled off south, those that escaped alive. The Thane has gone after them to hold off the big gang down that way, but he sent Peregrine back with all the other folk that could be spared. The next news was less good. Mary came riding in about 10 o'clock, reporting that there was a big band of men about 4 miles away, coming along the road from Waymeet. A good many stray ruffians have joined up with them, and there must be close to 100 of them. Farmer Cotton observed, this lot won't stay to talk. They'll just start killing. If the Tooks don't come sooner, the hobbits better get behind cover and shoot without argument. The Tooks did come sooner. Before long, they marched in, 100 strong, from Tuckborough and the Green Hills, with Pippin at their head. Merry now had enough sturdy hobbitry to work with. Scouts reported that the ruffians were keeping close together. They knew that the countryside had risen against them and plainly meant to deal with the rebellion ruthlessly, at its center in Bywater. But however grim they might be, they seemed to have no leader among them who understood warfare. They came on without any precautions. Ruffians came tramping down the east road, and without halting, turned up the Bywater road. Round a bend, about a furlong from the main road, they met a stout barrier of old farm carts upturned. That halted them. At the same moment, they became aware that the hedges on both sides, just above their heads, were all lined with hobbits. Behind them, hobbits now pushed out some more wagons that had been hidden in the field, and soon blocked their way back. A voice spoke to them from above. Well, you've walked into a trap, said Mary. Your fellows from Hobbiton did the same. One is dead and the rest are prisoners. Lay down your weapons, then go back 20 paces and sit down. Any who try to break out will be shot. A few of them obeyed, but were immediately set upon by their fellows. A score or more broke back and charged the wagons. 6 were shot, but the remainder burst out, killing 2 hobbits, and then scattering across country in the direction of Woody End. 2 more fell as they ran. Merry blew a loud horn call, and there were answering calls from the distance. "They won't get far," said Pippin. "All that country is alive with our hunters now." Behind, the men still trapped in the lane tried to climb the barrier and the banks, and the hobbits were obliged to shoot many of them. But many of the strongest and most desperate got out on the west side and attacked their enemies fiercely, being now more bent on killing than escaping. Several hobbits fell, and the rest were wavering, when Merry and Pippin came charging the ruffians. Merry himself slew the leader. Then he drew his forces off, encircling the last remnant of the men in a wide ring of archers. At last, all was over. Not an epic battle like Peter Jackson loves, but a nice little guerrilla war. Nearly 70 of the ruffians lay dead on the field, and a dozen were prisoners. 19 hobbits were killed, some 30 were wounded. The dead ruffians were buried in an old sandpit nearby. The fallen hobbits were laid together in a grave on the hillside, where later a great stone was set up with a garden about it. So ended the Battle of Bywater, 1419. The last battle fought in the Shire, and the only battle since the Greenfields, 1147, away up in the north farthing. In consequence, though it happily cost very few lives, it has a chapter to itself in the Red Book. Frodo had been at the battle, but his chief part had been to prevent the hobbits, in their wrath at their losses, from slaying those of the enemies who had thrown down their weapons. When the fighting was over and the later labors were ordered, Merry, Pippin, and Sam joined him, and they rode back with the Cottons. After a late lunch, Frodo said with a sigh, "Well, I suppose it's time now that we dealt with the chief." "The sooner the better," added Merry, "and don't be too gentle. He's responsible for bringing in these ruffians, and for all the evil that they have done." Then they set out on foot. Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin led the way, along with Farmer Cotton and an escort of some 24 sturdy hobbits. It was one of the saddest hours in their lives. The great chimney rose up before them as they drew near the old village across the water, through rows of new, mean houses along each side of the road. All along the Bywater Road, every tree had been felled. The old grange on the west side had been knocked down and its place taken by rows of tarred sheds. Bagshot Row was a yawning sand and gravel quarry. Bag End up beyond could not be seen for a clutter of large huts. "They've cut down the party tree," cried Sam, bursting into tears. A laugh put an end to them. Lounging over the low wall of the mill yard was a surly hobbit, grimy-faced and black-handed. "Don't you like it, Sam?" he sneered. "You always was soft. We work to do in the Shire now." "So I see," said Sam. "No time for washing, but time for wall propping. But see here, Mr. Sandyman, I've got a score to pay in this village, and don't you make it any longer with your jeering, or you'll foot a bill too big for your purse." Ted Sandyman spat over the wall. "Garn," he said. "You can't touch me. I'm a friend of the boss. But he'll touch you all right." "Don't waste any more words on the fool, Sam," said Frodo. "I hope there are not many more hobbits that have become like this. It would be a worse trouble than all the damage the men have done." You are dirty and insolent, Sandyman, said Mary, and also very much out of your reckoning. We're just going up the hill to remove your precious boss. We have dealt with his men. Ted gaped, catching sign of the escort that now marched over the bridge. Dashing back into the mill, he ran out with a horn and blew it loudly. Save your breath, laughed Mary. I've a better. Then lifting up his silver horn, he winded it, and his clear call rang over the hill. And out of the holes and sheds and shabby houses of Hobbiton, the hobbits answered, and followed the company up the road to Bag End. At the top of the lane, the party halted, and Frodo and his friends went on to the once beloved place. The garden was full of huts and sheds. There were piles of refuse everywhere. The door was scarred, the bell chain was dangling loose, the bell would not ring, and knocking brought no answer. They pushed the door, and the door yielded. The place stank and was full of filth. It did not appear to have been used for some time. Where is that miserable Lotho hiding? Said Mary. They had searched every room and found no living thing save rats and mice. Sam said it was much worse than Mordor because it's home. Frodo agreed. It was one of its works through Saruman, even when he thought he was working for himself. And the same with those that Saruman tricked, like Lotho. Mary looked around with dismay and disgust. Let's get out, he said. If I'd known all the mischief that he had caused, I would have stuffed my pouch down Saruman's throat. A voice came from the doorway. No doubt, but then I would not be able to welcome you home. Standing at the door, eyes gleaming with malice and amusement, was Saruman himself. A sudden light broke on Frodo. Sharky, he cried. Saruman laughed. So you've heard the name, have you? Evidently, you did not expect to see me here. I did not, said Frodo, but I might have guessed. A little mischief in a mean way. Gandalf warned me that you were still capable of it. Oh, quite capable, said Saruman, and more than a little. You thought you had done very well out of it all and could now just amble back and have a nice quiet time in the country. Saruman's home could be all wrecked, but no one would touch yours. Oh, no. Gandalf would look after your affairs. Saruman laughed again. Not he. When his tools have done their task, he drops them. But you must go dangling after him. Well, thought I, if they are such fools, I will get ahead of them and teach them a lesson. It would have been a sharper lesson if you'd given me a little more time. Still, I have already done much that you will find hard to mend or undo in your lives. Well, if that's what you find pleasuring, said Frodo, I pity you. You'll be a pleasure of memory only, I fear. Go at once and never return. When the hobbits of the village heard Frodo's command, they murmured angrily, No, don't let him go, kill him! Saruman looked around at that host of faces and smiled. Kill him, he mocked. You think there are enough of you? He drew himself up and stared at them. But do not think that when I lost all my goods, I lost all my power. He then curses anyone who strikes him or spills his blood. The hobbits recoiled. Frodo said, Do not believe him. He has lost all his power, save his voice that can still deceive you. But I will not have him slain. It is useless to meet revenge with revenge. It will heal nothing. Worm, worm, Saruman called. and Wormtongue came, crawling like a dog. To the road again, Worm. We are being turned adrift. Come along. Saruman turned to go, and Wormtongue shuffled after him. But as Saruman passed close to Frodo, a knife flashed in his hand, and he stabbed swiftly. The blade turned on the hidden mailcoat and snapped. A dozen hobbits, led by Sam, leapt forward with a cry and flung the villain to the ground. Sam drew his sword. "No, Sam," said Frodo. "Do not kill him, even now. I do not wish him to be slain in this evil mood. He was great once, of a noble kind, that we should not dare to raise our hands against. He has fallen, and his cure is beyond us, but I would still spare him." Saruman rose to his feet and stared at Frodo. There was a strange look in his eyes of mingled wonder and respect and hatred. "You have grown, halfling," he said. "Yes, you have grown very much. You are wise and cruel. You have robbed my revenge of sweetness, and now I must go hence in bitterness, in debt of your mercy. I hate it, and you." He walked away, but the hobbits' knuckles whitened as they gripped on their weapons. Wormtongue started to follow his master. "Wormtongue," called Frodo, "you need not follow him. I know of no evil you have done to me. You can have a rest here for a while, until you can go on your own way." Wormtongue halted and looked back at him, half prepared to stay. "No evil?" Saruman crackled. "Did I hear someone ask where poor Lotho is hiding? You know, don't you, Worm? Will you tell them?" Wormtongue cowered down and whimpered. "No, no." "Then I will," said Saruman. "Worm killed your chief, your little fellow, your nice little boss. Didn't you, Worm?" "Stabbed him in his sleep, I believe." "No, Worm is not really nice. You had better leave him to me." A look of wild hatred came into Wormtongue's eyes. "You told me to! You made me do it!" Saruman laughed. "You do what Sharky says always, don't you, Worm? Well, now he says, follow." He kicked Wormtongue in the face as he groveled and turned and made off. But at that, something snapped. Suddenly, Wormtongue rose up, drawing a hidden knife. He sprang on Saruman's back, jerked his head back, cut his throat, and with a yell ran off down the lane. Before Frodo could recover, 3 hobbit bows twanged, and Wormtongue fell dead. A gray mist gathered about the body of Saruman, rising slowly to a great height. As a pale, shrouded figure, it loomed over the hill. For a moment it wavered, looking to the west, but out of the west came a cold wind, and it bent away, and with a sigh dissolved into nothing. So yes, Wormtongue killed Saruman, but by slitting his throat, not stabbing him in the back, and Wormtongue was in turn slain, but by 3 hobbit archers, not 1 elf. Frodo looked down at the body with pity and horror. For as he looked, it seemed that long years of death were suddenly revealed. And it shrank, and the shriveled face became rags of skin upon a hideous skull. Lifting up the skirt of the dirty cloak that sprawled beside it, he covered it over and turned away. And that's the end of that, said Sam. A nasty end, and I wish I hadn't seen it, but it's a good riddance. And the very last of the war, I hope, said Merry. I hope so, said Frodo, and sighed. The very last stroke. But to think that it should fall here at the very door of Bag End. Among all my hopes and fears, at least I never expected that. Well, I shall not call it the end till we've cleaned up the mess, said Sam gloomily. And that'll take a lot of time and work. Well, let's take a break here and go help Sam. But we'll be back with 3 more episodes. There's still a lot that Jackson ignored. So until we meet again, thanks for watching. Check some of the other episodes. They work better if viewed in sequence. Do all the comment, like, subscribe stuff, or better yet, buy me a coffee.